Okay, so in this video here, I want to go ahead and talk about why ships end up in collisions. Now, why do I want to talk about this particular topic? Well, in a former life, I was a U.S. Navy surface warfare officer. Okay, and let me just write that here SWO. A surface warfare officer is an officer that you basically think of it as kind of like a ship driver. Just like you have pilots that fly airplanes, surface warfare officers effectively are flying, or not flying, but piloting. And that's a term that we use in the Navy: piloting, controlling, driving, whatever you want to think of the U.S. Navy ships. Okay, so it's a warfare specialty. A lot of training goes into it, many years. And with the recent events that are going on in the news, at least at the time of this video, there's a lot of Navy ships. Not a lot, but there's been a few accidents. But they're big deals. A lot of people this year have lost their life on these Navy ships in collisions, which is a tragedy in and of itself. And there's other accidents going on, ships running aground, etc. So, reading the news and seeing articles and comments, there's a lot of misconceptions out there, which is to be expected. But I'm hoping that I can shed a little bit of light on my opinion on why ships end up in collisions, and this is coming obviously from my experience. Now, this is not just related just to Navy ships, but just in kind of the maritime, uh, industry as a whole. So, also the target of this video is to those folks that just want to know a little bit more about how ships interact with one another out at sea, and maybe I kind of lighten you a little bit on why things can, go south, why things can not end up well, and you can end up having two ships collide. Okay, so with that being said, let's go and talk about a few things here. First of all, just as in airline or airplane accidents, probably the number one cause. And by the way, this is kind of speculation or conjecture on my part, but I'm pretty certain that it's probably backed up by facts. Okay, but the number one main reason ships will end up in some sort of collision is going to be human error, just like aircraft accidents or crashes. It's oftentimes pilot error, human error, no different with ships. And that's going to be a significant cause of why ships collide. Now, one thing I want to kind of establish here: a lot of people will think, well, human error, geez, there's two big ships here. Don't they see each other? It's just so obvious that they shouldn't crash. Well, let me tell you something. In the real world, under real world conditions, piloting a ship but when there's a lot of other ships around or certain scenarios, it's not easy. Okay, so ship driving, or let's just kind of use that term, ship driving. And I'm not talking like a little boat on your lake. I'm talking about, a 10,000 ton, ship that doesn't turn on a dime. Ship driving is not exactly easy. Now, there are, when things are well and there's not a lot of ships around, and, it can be enjoyable. You're kind of in control of this big, huge, thing in the water. So the concepts are easy, but in the real world conditions, what you have to face is not necessarily easy. In other words, it's a high pressure job, because if you make a mistake, ships can crash or collide and people can end up dying. So, there's no room for error. But unfortunately, there is going to be human errors because humans are not perfect. All right. So, just part of it. So, probably the majority, and you can kind of establish whatever percentage you want to put on it, definitely more than half, maybe three quarters plus, who knows. But a good significant portion of why ships end up in collision is people making mistakes. Okay, either both people on, because it takes two to tango, if you will. Both ships are involved, so both ships kind of warn. The two ships involved in the collision have responsibility. Okay, even it's not like maybe like in a car accident where you get hit by somebody that out of the blue, then that person's totally at fault. A little bit different when you're involved with two ships. Two ships, both officers of the deck, and that's what we call the person that's actually driving the ship, have to take, accept some responsibility. So it's kind of a mutual thing. Now, the second thing that would cause ships to end up in collision, it would be like a mechanical problem. Okay, and this is not so uncommon as well. So when you're out at sea, let's say your rudder gets stuck, which can happen, you lose one of your engines, now you're kind of not in control of your vessel. This happens, okay? So this can obviously result, in you losing control of the ship. And a ship can, just drift off and hit something or hit another ship or run aground. This happens. So mechanical problems are definitely part of the reasons why ships end up in collisions or running aground, which is basically a ship kind of going into very shallow water, which is a bad scenario. Remember, we're talking about ships here, and probably this is applicable to like small boat operation or small boats out on your local lake and things like that. Although I have to say, uh, when it comes to boating, definitely it's just not even human error. I'd have to use the word. It's almost human stupidity. There's a lot of people I've seen out on lakes that are just don't even know what they're doing, even though they got their little license and stuff. They just they're out there drinking and so that's a whole different deal. When we're talking about driving 10,000-ton ships around an ocean, that's a very professional kind of scenario. You're not gonna you have to have go through a lot of education, training, and qualification to be up there. Okay, it's a different deal. The third thing I would say is probably like weather. All right, so let's kind of keep this simple. Let's kind of keep it to three things here. So weather, obviously if there's fog, you name it, bad seas, etc., that can certainly contribute to ships colliding. Now, one of the things I want to address here is this it's a fallacy, it's a misconception. Let's talk about fog. Like, well, why would fog cause two modern big ships to collide? Well, you know, just because you have a radar doesn't mean that, the risk doesn't go up. You need it's really important when you're out at sea, when you're involved two of the ships, you need to be looking at the using binoculars, right? You need to be using your eyeballs, and if you cannot see, the risk go up. All right, so I'm going to tell you right now, when you cannot see, and you cannot see, all right, the risk go up tremendously. All right, um, so that's why it's important. Like when you're uh, out at sea, you have to have lookouts. You got to be constantly scanning, searching, etc. And I can tell you right now, radar. Okay, and those of you, I'm sure all of you have an idea what radar is. It can be like a little instrument here that's kind of swapping around, and you're kind of in a center, and these little blips pop up, which are the ships. Radar is not perfect. It's definitely not perfect. Okay, I don't care. Well, let's take the best radars in the world, which would be like on U.S. Navy, Aegis class, destroyers. Those are super high tech. 99% of the ships out there don't even have anything close to that. They're going to have like a basic, um, uh, like an old school radar that maybe you can see within, say, 20 miles. And that's perfectly fine. That's what you need. But radar does not pick up every single object out there. Okay. And there's radar can have, you can have issues with your radar. Okay. Your radar is being fed by a gyro, kind of goes into mechanical problems. Weather can kind of make radar not so great. I mean, radar is a tool that you absolutely need to depend upon, but it's not 100% perfect. When you have radar and you're able to see, then you can make better decisions. Now, I want to kind of jump into um, why ships end up in collisions. I want to obviously try to categorize this so this video is somewhat logical. So human error, mechanical problems, and weather. Now, one of the things that bothers me when I read the news and I hear this commentary about what's going on is this kind of false sense of security that technology, like, oh, how these Navy ships, they have all this radar and all this other gizmos on it, and it's true. They have a lot of technology, but oftentimes technology does not mean you're not going to have problems, right? Sometimes it's the inverse, it's the reverse. Sometimes when you have too much technology, all right, you can get kind of too much information. All right. There's an old saying, you may have heard of this, it's called paralysis by analysis. And effectively, paralysis is what? Being frozen, and analysis is almost like too much information that you're looking at. You can get kind of information overload sometimes, and I'm speaking kind of at least from my experience on Navy ships. You can get a lot of information coming in, and when you need to make a decision, and if you're kind of overloaded with information, you you can lag in your decision making. All right, all this comes down to is making decisions, and you want to make this good decisions because you need time to do something out at sea with two ships. Okay, you can't make a good decision, where there's 30 seconds left before you're going to end up in a collision. So decisions is at the roots of all of this. Okay, and even under like mechanical problems and weather, although these guys here are certainly contributing factors to collisions, even some of these scenarios could could have there was human error there. Okay, so it's when you're an officer of the deck, I know, at least from my experience, you have to be thinking about everything, what can go wrong, like consistently, like what can go wrong if it's all about decision making. And that kind of brings me to my next point. um, well, let me just kind of back up here, right? So technology, all right, technology, this sense that, you're reading, in the news, or you're watching the news, that all these Navy ships, they have all this technology. Well, unfortunately, too much technology will provide an overload in information, and if it really comes down to the person. Okay, so if the person's not able to make good decisions in a timely manner, then you can have all this information in the world, it's not going to help you. This brings me to my next point. Okay, and that's training. And this is a big one. This is a huge one. So the Navy, what I've seen in the news, they've changed the way they train surface warfare officers some maybe 15 years ago. I could be off 10, 20 years. But I think probably around 15, maybe 20 years ago. Back when I was a surface warfare officer, that's in the 1990s. The kind of training that I went through was the type of training that officers went through for many, many, decades prior to. Basically, if you were a U.S. Navy officer, you would go to a school called SWAS, right? Surface Warfare Officer School, and this school was at least 6 months plus. You would go there, and what do you learn there? Well, you learn about everything and anything on board ship. They're not going to be perfect because it takes many years, many, many years to really master all these different areas: navigation, engineering, um, weapons tactics, etc. You're talking about a ship out at sea, a Navy ship that's interacting with aircraft, submarines, other ships. You're doing all types of different operations, amphibious operations, surface operations. There's a lot to learn. So when you go to Surface Warfare Officer School, you're getting trained, introduced to these different areas. But one of the primary things that you're really learning is you're learning about ship driving. Okay, we kind of call it rules of the road, right? Which is various scenarios. How do you navigate other ships how do you navigate within other different Navy ships? Different type of what do you do when you're faced with the various scenarios, out at sea. How do you drive? And basically, it's kind of like you kind of think of it as you're driving, like what you did in high school when you got your driver's license. Lots of training, this and that. But there's lots of rules that you need to learn. Okay, and there's lots of different basic scenarios that you need to cover. And we would have simulators and uh, etc. You learn how to talk on the radio, learn the basics of radar, certain things called maneuvering boards that help us figure out how to turn, because you're talking about relative motion. You got multiple ships coming at you different ways, etc. Bottom line is you would get a lot of this. And it was excellent training, yeah, at Surface Warfare Officer School. There used to be two, one in San Diego and another one in Newport, Rhode Island. I actually went to the one in Newport, Rhode Island. But, anyways, it would be like 6 months plus. And previous to that, I actually went to, I was commissioned in the U.S. Navy via the NROTC program. And in college, we were doing some of this training, well, actually, quite a bit of it. So, bottom line is this: there was a lot of training involved, a lot of training before you even got to your ship. Before you got to your ship. And then once you got to your ship, once you ended up on your ship, you would have to progress through different levels before they even kind of let you loose as an officer of the deck. You had to go through lots of different um, hurdles, and you had to get basically you had to get the confidence of the officers above you. You know, namely the commanding officer, because he's going to be responsible for what you do. Okay, so you would start off as a conning officer, and then you would just move up to let's see here, combat information watch officer, and then you would move up to oh, let's see, that would be like junior officer of the deck, and then officer of the deck under instruction, and then eventually officer of the deck, and then eventually you would possibly qualify to become a surface war officer. This whole thing here in the Navy back in my day would take, no, maybe close to 3 years to get all done. 2 years would be very, very fast. It's very similar to like pilots earning their wings. When you go to, you know, flight school, that's like a year and a half, 3 year, deal. All right. No different than this. So driving a big ship with everything going on, I'm not a pilot by trade, but we had pilots and we involved. The mentality is the same. It's decision making in real time. Okay, how do you take in information? What do and make good decisions in a kind of a relative motion, atmosphere. Of course, ship driving is kind of two dimensional, whereas flying an airplane is like three dimensional. But let's get back to this whole purpose of this video: why ships end up in collisions. Well, training is a big one. So the type of training that I went through, I felt was prepared myself and a lot of other, at least the folks that I've spoke to that were in the Navy for decades, back in the 60s, and even people I spoke to in the 50s. Now, this changed. This changed back, and I believe it was the early 2000s. The Navy uh, did away with their uh, surface warfare officer school. I think there's a requirement. I think it exists, but it's kind of a smaller version of it. It's not as extensive as it used to be. Basically, they reduced the training and they kind of streamlined it very much so, where a lot of officers just kind of went to ships. Um, and then we're given like maybe a CD-ROM, the necessary material to kind of learn and read on their own. But then we're given the formal classroom training. Now, I'm not going to be here second guessing the Navy why they did that. Probably was because of money, and I can understand that because the Navy is getting smaller and operational tempo. The deployments are getting, there's more pressure on the Navy from a budget stance, and this is all the military from operations standpoint, from a budget standpoint. So you could see why they're trying. They would want to streamline this. However, I think that was it's proving to have been, detrimental. Okay, because this training, this kind of buildup of knowledge and skill, and being around a lot of, experienced officers and listening to their stories and in their training and their lessons learned was instrumental. I mean, that really set up the junior officers I went through to be kind of ready to kind of grow their skill set on board ship. Now, if I was just coming right out of college and just had a month or so of training and then I went board or ship, I know for certain that I'd be well behind the power curve in terms of learning, being ready, able to learn all that formal training, which is probably maybe 6 months to even maybe close to a year, because you go into additional schools, helped me tremendously. So when you have all this information, okay, you got all this information on board these ships, and you have to make a decision, and you don't have the proper training, and I'm talking about really training and experience, bad things are going to happen. Okay, it kind of gets back to our main point, human error. So I would say for me, if I would, and of course, I'm just a citizen. You know, I could just vote and everything else. But for me, obviously, to and what I'm reading in the news, this is the case. Obviously, if you're going to have to amend the training, you're going to have to make the training better. Okay, so why do ships end up in collisions? Human error, which translates into training. Okay, the training has to get better, and the training means not just formal training. It means mentorship, having experience, etc. This is a huge thing. Of course, I'm talking about the U.S. Navy, but it's applicable to all maritime industries. You know, whoever is up there standing that watch, is critical, right? What's their training? What's their background? You know, how many different scenarios have they been in, etc. Now, with that being said, I just wanted to kind of walk you through some real basic stuff about rules of the road and kind of, illustrate. I'll do the best I can for especially those people who have no experience out at sea. And if you happen to be former surface warfare officer or current surface warfare officer, you're going to have your own opinion and expert opinion on this, and that's fine. This video is really geared towards, my it's more of a general video for those folks that maybe just want a little bit more about why ships can end up in these kind of collisions. So let's take a look at some scenarios here. So just so you know, basic rules of the road. So let's say here's our little ship here, right? So this is the front. We call the bow, and this is the stern. So when you're looking towards the front, okay, we have two sides. This is called the port, all right, and this is called the starboard side, okay, port and starboard. Now, a port, all right, this is going to have a little red light here, and the starboard side is going to have a little green light. Okay, that's what you need to know. There's so much more I can get into this here, but this is just a real basic. And in the back, you're going to have a little white light. Okay, so these lights here out at sea, these kind of help us. They're basically almost kind of like signal lights when you're driving down a road. Let's take a look at the scenario. Let's look at how this works. All right, this can now even this is like the daytime. All right, it's fine because if you could see a ship, you can just imagine, you can kind of know where its red and green lights are at, right? So here's two, let's say, ships, and they're, oh no, a few miles away, whatever. Let's say they're 3 miles away from one another. So this side is going to be red, and this side is going to be green, right? It's port, starboard, right? This is the bow. And so let's kind of go over here. This would be the red, and this would be the green. All right, so hopefully you're with me so far. And let's take a look at this scenario. Now, in Navy talk, well, not Navy talk, in maritime talk, a condition called CB, CBDR tells us that we're going to have a collision, right? This means constant bearing, decreasing range. Basically, it means this. This guy here, he's looking at this guy, and he sees him off his kind of starboard bow like so. And this ship is, he's out there looking at him, next minute later, he sees him right here. Now, this range is decreased, but his bearing, his relative bearing off of where his position, off of where he's looking, isn't. The ship is getting bigger, right? And so unfortunately, it's just like right there, right? So this means constant bearing, decreasing range. CBDR, that's like that's you don't want to hear that, right? So that's bad. That means collision, all right? So CBDR, constant bearing, decreasing range. So let's suppose that you're looking at these two ships looking at one another, and they have a, they kind of figure, well, if we don't do something, we're going to end up in a collision. Well, how does this work? Real basic. And even these folks that are on the lake and they're boating license understand this. This guy here sees what? This ship, whoever sees the red light, okay, this, you can think of that as a stoplight, all right? So he sees red, right? This guy sees red, and what does this ship over here see? It's going to use a different color. This guy is seeing, he's going to see the green, okay? So green means kind of go. This is really simple stuff here in terms of how the rules of the road, the fundamentals of it work, right? Now, at nighttime, you would see the lights, but at daytime, okay, or when it's day, we know where the lights are going to be at, right? On the starboard and port side of the ship. So Let's talk about responsibility now. The ship that sees the red light, okay, which is this guy. All right, let's see. He sees the red light. This guy sees the green light. Okay. So what's supposed to happen here? Well, the ship that is seeing the red light, okay, he's supposed to stop. Now he doesn't have to stop, like completely stop in the middle of the ocean. Okay. What's supposed to happen is he has to what we call give away. Now, typically, what's going to happen is he will want to slow down, okay, slow down and just kind of open up space in between these two vessels and kind of creep behind this guy. This guy, his response, this is he's legally responsible to get out of the way of the ship, okay. So this guy has the right of way. Now he also has responsibility to continue to go straight, okay. That he's got to continue to go on. He can't necessarily kind of do something confusing. This would be called like a passing situation. Okay, so green means hey, I got to stay on until this collision or till this till our interaction kind of diminishes, and then we kind of go out to sea. Obviously, this involves judgment, call, etc. Now, the way this works with big ships out at sea, when you're boating, that's pretty easy. But when you're pretty close to ships, and I'm talking, oh, and I'm going by memory, maybe within maybe 5 nautical miles, but that's definitely pretty close. That would be like 10,000 meters. You're definitely, want to be, you're close enough for sure. You need to be, in communication talking to these other ships. This is, by the way, completely vary depending on what kind of ship you're on, etc. I'm just kind of going by memory. It's been many years, but I think I got this, pretty close. Okay, so the reason why is that these big ships they don't turn on a dime. Okay, you got to start making decisions pretty quick, proactive decisions to avoid to be safe. Okay, you don't want to get close, and close in the Navy would be like within 1 mile. That's pretty really close. Okay, like 1 nautical mile of ship to ship out in the middle of the ocean is very, very close. So the way this works is this ship, okay, would or either one of these ships would try to contact this ship via channel 16. All right, it's a VHF radio. All right, so they would just it would this ship would try to contact the ship, effectively call them up, and the way that's done is, hey, like say, hey, ship, I see you. I see you're going at this course, and I can see you're going at this speed. So there's ways we can use our radar to determine that. And you appear to be so many miles away from me, and I'd like to talk to you on channel 16. And this ship says, oh, okay, I see you as well. And then you'll switch to another channel because this channel is, you're not. It's not meant for you to have a whole conversation. So you'll switch to another channel, let's say channel 9, and then you talk. Okay, you'll say, hey, listen, I see you. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to, like to kind of slow down, and we can have what we call a port to port passage. In other words, this ship is going to go this way, and this ship will go this way. All right, so this is its port side, and this is this ship's port side, and you'll have a port to port passage, and we go on our merry way. So you kind of would come up with a proposal. This guy agrees, hey, I agree, that's our plan, and we're gonna that's what we're gonna do. This is how, this is the perfect kind of scenario that's supposed to happen when you're out at sea, two passing ships. Now this happens every day. Okay, in the U.S. Navy, this is happening right now constantly. And so you don't hear about the 99.9% of the times where this goes well, this goes right, and it doesn't have to be a Navy ship and a civilian, container ship, tanker ship, you name it, freighter, or another Navy ship. So this generally goes right all the time. Okay. Now, what ends up happening is, let's suppose we have fog. All right. Let's kind of make some fog here. We got fog. Well, it now becomes difficult. We can't see what's going on. All we can do is use our kind of our tracks on radar to kind of figure out who has the right of way, who's supposed to be turning, etc. And that happens as well. Okay, so these things can happen. This is why you need highly trained people at the helm of the ships, and this is why you need to be proactive, because two ships, you think about, let's see here, these ships might be going well, let's say 15 to 20 miles per hour. We don't use miles per hour, we use knots, but just for those of you out there that want to know, let's say, even as slow as say 10 to 20 miles per hour. Let's call it. But a closing rate, if you're going say 20 miles an hour this way and you're going 20 miles an hour this way, you're talking about 40 miles per hour. You're that's pretty quick. So in other words, you can end up in a collision much quicker than you think you are, think you can, within even if you're 5 miles away. Okay, within say 5 to 10 minutes, you can be in a real, what we call, uh, well, they call it an extremis, which means that now you have to do some sort of radical emergency move to get out of the way of one another. So this is a kind of perfect kind of real basic kind of scenario that we would have two ships crossing at sea. There's a million other, well, not a million, but there's so many other different type of scenarios, different type of rules that would predict this. But this was a real basic kind of fundamental rule of the road, okay, where two ships are supposed to happen, or two ships interact with one another is kind of supposed to be the rules are supposed to be applying. But here's the reality of the situation. When you're into like one of these particular accidents that happen, well, near Japan, when there's a lot of different ships out there, it's not as simple as that. Absolutely, okay. Let's take a little scenario. I'm just going to draw. Let's say this is land, and you got ships coming all different directions. Let's say you got ships kind of heading out of a port. They're kind of going this way. You got ships coming into port, maybe kind of going this way. All right, and you can, these are 5 miles apart. You got ships going, little small boats going this way, this way. You got ships kind of wanting to go out to sea here. You want ships kind of coming in this way, and you need to throw in some fog. Okay, here's our fog in here. In reality, when you're when there's a lot of ships around you, okay, and you're supposed to kind of stay in a particular lane, all right, kind of just think of it just like the freeway or anything else, the road. The problem is this: a lot of these ships are coming into these lanes, or coming out of different ports, and they're smaller vessels. It gets confusing. Absolutely gets confusing. In other words, there's confusion going on because there's ships kind of crisscrossing around. It can get that bad. So this ship, if I have this guy, he wants to maybe kind of go, he can't really cross this traffic separation lane, but let's say at the end of this lane, ships can kind of come into these lanes in different ways. Okay, you might be interacting. Let's take this scenario. You have to consider what's going on with this ship. This ship, maybe this guy is okay, but if this guy turns around and he says, "Well, I need to kind of come back," the reality of it when you're driving a ship is it's not as simple as the previous example I showed you. Sometimes it is, but oftentimes when there's a lot of traffic going on, a lot of ship traffic, it's a very dynamic environment, and things can happen. That's why you have to be on your toes for sure. But in the end, uh, let's say that here's a ship, and we're on this ship, and we got this ship and this ship. This guy's coming up on us real fast. This guy decides to turn around. In the end, when nothing else works, you have to escape. All right, I can't tell you. There was more than a few times for sure as a U.S. Navy officer where, listen, the rules kind of went out the window in terms of I can't talk to a particular ship. They're doing things that they're not supposed to be doing. You know what I did? I left. I said, this is the safest way for me to go. I'm getting away from everybody. All right. And I'm sure a lot of folks out there in the Navy or other vessels, that's what you have to do. You got to be extremely defensive and be like, I'm going to escape because I don't understand the situation, and you do you do that when you have to do that, because the bottom line is if you're getting closer to a ship and you don't understand a scenario, you have to escape. And that's unfortunate because I think that's where a couple of these Navy collisions doesn't make sense to me, that these it didn't translate into that. And there's a lot of reasons why maybe a ship couldn't escape. One of the reasons might be shoal water, which means shallow water here. I mean, shallow water here, you're kind of stuck. In other words, you can't just pop over here because you'll run the ship aground. And There's all types of different scenarios that could prevent you from doing that. That's why you have to be highly trained. You got to be working together as a team. You got to be fully alert. And really, it comes down to training. I keep harping on this, but it comes down to training and experience. Because even with the best training and experience, it's still a dynamic scenario. It's not a zero risk type of you know um, game. All right, it's just like flying an airplane. They might be able to make it 99% safe, but there'll always be that 1% um, uh, of danger involved. Same thing with ships out at sea. So, hopefully you got a little bit out of this video. I don't want to go too much more than this, other than hopefully to give you an appreciation of it's not it's not as easy driving ships and stuff, or it's not as easy as a lot of people think. Like, well, no, I just can't see how those two ships would collide. It's very much unfortunate, and it's tough to be kind of a backseat quarterback. And you need to be, hopefully, my purpose of this video is to inform you a little bit more and be like, yeah, take it with a grain of salt. The people driving these ships, although they're going to be more likely found with cause, and unfortunately, rightfully so, driving ships out at sea, okay, to avoid collisions is not it's not so simple. So you shouldn't oversimplify that. And what we need to do, at least in terms of our military, I feel strong about this, is, I hope that we give the people that are responsible for driving these ships the adequate training. Okay, they need the training, and the better. And I hope the Navy can figure that out. In terms of civilian vessels, merchant marines or cruise ships and things like that. Hey, listen, they make a lot of, I believe they make way more money than you'd make in the U.S. Navy, as they should be. And they need a lot of training. Okay, lots of training. Now, unfortunately, there's people from all different parts of the world that are operating ships and whatnot. You can't speak for everybody. That's why you have to kind of, in the end, be highly defensive when you're driving ships. Um, because you might be coming up, just like when you're driving a car, you might be coming up with a person that's just like, a terrible driver, has no clue of what they're doing. And that can happen out at sea as well. All right. Especially if we have a big ship and it's facing like a smaller little boat, and have boats all over the place. That, I can't tell you how many times that's happened to me. Anyways, I'm going to kind of wrap this video up. I hope that I've given you some insight on why, how big ships can end up in collisions. These two big objects that seem to be kind of going slow, and they're just kind of real, and they're like, it's not as easy as, oh, here's a big ship and here I'm a big ship and look, we're going to collide. Yeah, it doesn't work that way in the real world. Okay. So just to wrap it up, human error, and I would take this lesson learned and translate it to other things that you might be involved in. I know I do when it comes to driving a car. Okay, like, hey, the way I drive is I kind of, I'm highly defensive. Driving a car or other things that we do, 90% of the time it's because we were making some sort of mistake. Anyways, if you like this video, please subscribe. I do these. I mostly do math videos and whatnot, but because of my naval background, I enjoy kind of throw my 2 cents out there. So thanks for watching. I really appreciate it, and hopefully you got something out of this video. Have a great day.